Now let's look at question number 2 and figure out how we're going to report what we found. These are the directions from the assignment, pretending it's what the regents have asked for. We've already created specific research questions, so let's look at the second task. We need to describe what we did and the rationale. Here's a possible answer. All analyses were used alpha set at 0.05. There were 2 groups of teachers in the sample. Group 1, with an N equals 13, had 5 years or less teaching experience. Group 2, N equals 12, had more than 5 years teaching experience. The 2 groups were independent of each other, so an independent t-test was done to determine if the evaluation score means were statistically different. Let's move on to question 3. Here's where I report what I found. I'm going to need the results from SPSS. First of all, I'm going to report the means for each group. Here's a suggestion for reporting. The mean evaluation score for the less experienced teachers was 15.85 with a standard deviation of 1.68. The mean evaluation score for the more experienced teachers was 19.25 with standard deviation of 1.71. Next, I'm going to report on the assumption of homogeneity of variance. The regents may not expect this, but your professor does. Here's an example of how it can be reported. The assumption for homogeneity of variance was met. F equals 0.16, P equals 0.90. Therefore, equal variances were assumed. Now it's time to report on whether or not these means were statistically different from each other. Here's how I would write it up. The difference between the evaluation score means was statistically significant. T, degrees of freedom 23, equals negative 5.02, P of less than 0.001. Now I need to interpret the results for my audience. Here's a suggestion. The difference in means was 3.40 points. The teachers with more experience had higher evaluation scores than teachers with less experience. This finding suggests that teachers with more experience are rated as better teachers using the state evaluation system. Don't go too far out on a limb with your interpretations. Keep them within the realm of what you have analyzed. For example, it would be inappropriate for me to write that the state evaluation system can distinguish between good or poor teachers, or that teachers with more experience are better teachers than those with less experience. I need to stay with what I actually have in front of me. We always say in statistics that we're not interested in your opinion. We're interested in your evidence. So now you're ready for the analysis for research questions 3 and 4. Question 3 and 4, I'm going to go a little bit quicker because you've done this before now once. So we'll move along and I'm going to do those 2 questions together. Again, remember I'm in my Analyze, Compare Means, and Independent Samples t-test. When the window pops up, you're going to see what you did last time. Your dependent variable's not going to change. Your options aren't going to change. But what's going to change is your grouping variable. We've already done the years of experience, so I'm going to take that one out. Now, question 3 is about whether teachers' eval scores are dependent on whether or not they teach at a school with poverty, which is Title I, is how we label that. So I'm going to grab that one for my grouping variable. Once again, I'm going to define my groups. Group 0 is those who do not teach at a Title I school, and 1 indicates those who do teach at a Title I school. So notice I've got my my grouping variable filled in, my dependent variable hasn't changed, and once again my confidence interval hasn't changed. I'm still staying with an alpha of 0.05. So I'm ready to go. I click OK, and SPS does its magic. Now, if you've kept your output open, you'll see your t-test for the first one that we did, and then your t-test for the second one. I like to relabel these. So this one here is the t-test for eval score by years of experience. Whatever works for you. And this next one that I just did that just popped into my output is a t-test. And this one is eval score by Title I or not. Okay? Just so that as I'm gathering my output, I've got these labels in here, and I can go back and quickly and easily see which results go with which test. And I'm actually going to save it at this point so that I don't lose what I've done. Okay, so here I've got my output for whether or not they're at a Title I school or not. I can go through here and I can look at it right now, but I'm just going to quickly go back and do my last test for question number 4. I'm going to go back to my data editor. I'm switching between these two windows. And now I'm going to analyze it. I'm going to compare the means, independent samples, t-test, and here's my dependent variable, my options. I'm going to leave all of this the same. But my grouping variable needs to change. And my last question was about whether there's a difference in the eval score depending on whether the administrator has done the person's evaluation 2 years in a row or not. So I'm going to grab that grouping variable. Group 1 will be those who have switched administrators in there, or group 0 is the group that has switched administrators, and group 1 is the ones who have the same administrator. You can see that I usually use 0 for no and 1 for yes, but that's just a personal convention so that I can keep track of myself sometimes. And I'm ready to go, and I click OK, and another t-test pops in, and this one is actually for evaluation score by, I'll just put admin, so that I know that. So now on my output, I have the years of experience, t-test, whether or not they're in a Title I school, and whether or not their admin has evaluated them 2 years in a row or not. Let's start with question 3, which is about Title I. Remember the pattern I'm going to use. I'm going to describe the test I use and the rationale for it. I'm going to report the results, and I'm going to interpret. So I start out. Teachers in the sample either taught in a low poverty, n equals 11, or high poverty, n equals 14 school. An independent, because it's either, t-test was done to compare the evaluation score means for teachers in high poverty schools, Title I, and those in low poverty schools, not Title I. Then I report the assumption for homogeneity of variance. It was not met. F equals 5.41, P equals 0.2029. Notice that the P is less than 0.05. So I have to reject that null hypothesis that the variances are the same. Therefore, equal variances were not assumed. Now I'm going to interpret it. The mean evaluation score for the teachers in low poverty schools was 17.91, standard deviation 1.81. The mean evaluation score for teachers in high poverty schools was 17.14, standard deviation of 2.80. The difference of 0.77 between the evaluation score means was not statistically significant. T with 22 degrees of freedom, notice that you round it to the whole number, equals 0.83, P equals 0.417. Notice that when you're rejecting a null hypothesis, you report the p-value that's given in SPSS. So now I can interpret it. There was statistically no difference in evaluation scores for teachers in low or high poverty schools. Evaluation scores were not affected by the teacher poverty associated by, there's teacher poverty, but the evaluation scores were not affected by the student poverty associated with the teaching assignment. Now, I would suggest you pause now and see if you can go through the reporting for question 4. Teachers in the sample were either evaluated by the same administrator in a row, 2 years in a row, n equals 13, or a different administrator each year, n equals 12. That either makes them independent samples. So an independent t-test was done to compare the evaluation score means for the two groups of teachers. The assumption for homogeneity of variance was met. F equals 3.47, P equals 0.075. So I'm going to keep the null hypothesis. Therefore, equal variances were assumed. The mean evaluation score for the teachers evaluated by two different administrators was 16.92, standard deviation 2.75. The mean evaluation score for teachers evaluated twice by the same administrator was 18, with a standard deviation of 2. The difference of 1.08 between the evaluation score means was not statistically significant. T with 23 degrees of freedom equals negative 1.13. P equals 0.268. So you've just gone through the 3 steps for each of the expectations in the assignment. We developed research questions, then you described the rationale and the test that was done. You reported an answer, and you interpreted the results in the manner that could be understood by teachers in the state education regions. You're ready now to tackle your assignment.